You want to share a little bit about what you shared with me on the phone?
First of all, I want to say thank you for the invitation. I also want to say God does all things well. He allowed you to select these three people on purpose and for a purpose because we are all connected. My old village sister, I now remember her mother and my mother were friends.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Her mother and my mother were friends. And you were the only one that been locked up with the title in front of my name. So don't worry about what people say about you. It doesn't matter because what God has for you is for you. The purpose that He has in you will be birthed. Record and all. I tell people, Google me. I don't care nothing about it. And so He allowed you to pick these three people on purpose and for a purpose. Shonda talked about the storm that she was driving through, and she said she kept going and she followed the light. And I said, well, God told you to call me today because the last two sermons I preached were cry but don't quit. And He didn't bring you this far to bring you this far. Cry but don't quit. We drive through storms all the time, and sometimes we pull over thinking that if we just pull over, the storm will stop. But if we just keep going, I told her I had come back from Florence that week. We were in conference in Florence, and as I was coming back, I ran into this horrible storm. And I'm like her, I hate driving in the storm. I hate driving, period, but driving in the storm is even worse. But I kept going. And about 5 minutes down the road, it was clear. The ground was dry, like there was nothing going on. So, well, what in the world? And I just kept driving. And 5 minutes later, I get back in the storm. And 5 minutes down the road, it was clear again. I could cry and do all kinds of other things. I could pull over, I could stop, I could do all of that. But the one thing I didn't do was quit. I kept going because eventually I got out of the storm. The Bible tells us that weeping endures for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Every instance of you weeping has an expiration date. Yeah. And when it expires, there's joy on the other side of it. Yeah. So you can cry, just don't quit. It never said don't cry. It just said don't quit. And then we talked about the Israelites and how they wandered around for 40 days when the journey should have took them 7 days. But because God made a promise to them, He didn't bring them this far just to bring them this far. You won't wander for 40 days or 40 years, right? And your journey you might think it's going to take you 7 days, and it might take you 40 years, right? But He didn't bring you this far just to bring you this far. Because He made a promise to you, and He's going to fulfill that promise that He made to you. So if He brought you to it, He's going to bring you through it on the other side. Now I talked about, she wasn't the only person that's been arrested. My darkest, I'm going to answer the question you asked her. My darkest moment in my life was when I woke up in MUSC on a ventilator with an eye patch, and I had been beaten, domestic violence, and I had been stabbed 3 times, basically. I had lost 33% of the blood in my body. I should be dead. I should be dead. 33% of the blood in your body. That was my lowest point. But you know that scripture that says the word is like a two-edged sword? It literally was a two-edged sword for me because God had been calling me and calling me and calling me. But I was in the world. I had been in the church. I grew up in the church. If you all know my grandmother, she would tell the story all the time. She used to drag me to church in a basket. That's that baby I used to drag to church in a basket. One day I said, what kind of basket? She said, a laundry basket. What you mean? I said, you used to take me to church in a laundry basket? Yeah, girl, I used to drag you to church in a basket. But that child she had drugged to church in a basket that grew up in the church had been in the world. Because she had been rejected by the church, so she had been in the world. And because I was in the world, I was doing everything I thought I was big and bad enough to do. And so I was out there with this man that wasn't my husband. He wasn't anybody else's husband, but he didn't commit to being mine. Sometimes we get in relationships because let me tell you how I got to that relationship. As a teenager, I was molested. Multiple times. Men, keep your children, watch your daughters. Watch your daughters. Any man that is comfortable being in the presence of your teenage daughter, watch them. I was molested by somebody that lived in my house, that was married to my mother. He wasn't my father, so it didn't matter to him. And we're being transparent. Nothing hidden gets you. My mom drank. Love her to death. I remember the first time he molested me, they had been to a party, she was out of it. She was so drunk. He dared me to wake her up. I couldn't wake her up. So being molested as a teenager pushed me into a space of being over-sexualized as an adult. So I got into relationships that meant me no good and got with a man. We were together for 12 years. I had 3 children by him, but he wasn't my husband. Never committed to being my husband. And then when things, and took me from, I grew up in Mount Pleasant, took me from Mount Pleasant, moved me out to Lansing, I had no one out there. Killed my self-esteem and left me out there. So when I moved back to Mount Pleasant where I had support systems, then he became insecure. And I was doing this, and you cheating on me, you doing this, you doing this, you doing this, you doing this. The night this man tried to take my life, he had been in the house the entire time, and he was texting me like he was at work. He was hiding in a closet under the stairs the entire time. The phone rang in the house. He came upstairs and said, "Who's on the phone?" And I had a smart mouth. I still got a smart mouth. I said, "Well, I don't," because I had a cordless phone and a corded phone. I picked up one, he picked up the other. We're both saying hello. Nobody on the phone says anything because I guess they're confused. So he said, "Who's on the phone?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." And so I guess he blacked out because that's when he began to fight me. But what he didn't know was I knew how to fight too. I had watched my mom fight and I had helped my mother fight. And I told him when we got together I was not going to fight in my own house. And if I had to, it was going to be a problem. So I was fighting him. He pulled hair out my head, y'all. He kicked me in my eye and busted my eye. And I heard him say, "Let me go get my knife." But he had to go downstairs. And when he went downstairs, I went downstairs behind him. And I tried to get out the front door, and he came back and he tried to stop me, but he didn't have the knife, so he still had to go back to the kitchen. And I ran to the back door, and as I got to the back door, he got me in the middle of my back. And then I got outside, and he got the back of my arm, and I turned around when he got the back of my arm, and he put that knife right here, and he just drug it all the way down my arm. If I took this shirt off, you would see I have a scar from here to here. But God, I drugged myself to my neighbor's house and knocked on her back door. I didn't even know who opened the door for me because I could not see. Fast forward, later when we got to court and they showed me the pictures, it looked like a crime. It looked like something out of a movie, out of a crime scene. My blood on the floor where it was just dripping from me, just dragging it through the house. My handprint on her wall. She had a black leather couch. You could see my blood on the black leather couch. My last memory was them putting me on the operating table, and I was Jane Doe. They had to admit me as Jane Doe because he worked at the hospital that they needed to take me to and was supposed to be on shift at the hospital that they took me to. And I remember them putting me on the table, and they took the packing out of my arm, and I watched my blood shoot across the room on the wall. And that's the last thing I remember. God had a purpose for me then, and He has a purpose for me now.
Yes, He does.
And He couldn't kill what He didn't create. God put me on this earth for a purpose, and I always laugh and I say, "God, you got a real funny sense of humor because I'm about the craziest person." Like, I love to have fun, right? But I take that fun and I put that fun in ministry. I am the youth ministry coordinator for my church, but God had a funny plan because He done took me away from there and sent me out to Jamestown, the pastor. Wow. So I don't have my youth anymore. I have them, but I don't have them. but my calling is for women,